To have someone with us today who you all know and you'll hear from in a few minutes. That's Senator David Pryor. But first I want to... Oh yeah, sure, Bobby. Sorry. There he is. First I want to recognize and thank the organizers of this event. That's the co-chairs of our fundraising committee. Ann Henry. Ann's in the room. Ann. There she is. Frank Sharp is in the room somewhere. Thanks, Frank. And our other co-chair is Dan Ferreter, who's on his way back from a meeting in Little Rock, and will be here at some point, we think, unless the men in blue pull him over, which... Over 25 years ago, the honorary chairman of our fundraising committee, Jim Blair, was on the State Board of Higher Education when some funding came available for special projects for all colleges and universities throughout the state. It was a competitive program, and KUAF submitted a proposal. Jim Blair shepherded our proposal through, and we received $200,000 to create a public radio station. A couple years later, we were working on a power increase and needed some local funding to match a federal grant. Again, Jim Blair stepped up and got us some local corporate money. Today, he's going beyond the call of duty once again to help us raise $1.5 million for the building that you see under construction across the street from the Blair Library. I'm very happy to introduce our honorary chairman, Jim Blair. Jim.
Well, I have to tell you the reason that I was able to get that $200,000 because I was the chairman of the State Board of Higher Education is because Governor David Pryor put me on there to begin with. And you're going to get to hear from Senator Pryor in a little bit, and I want to tell you that as the younger generation comes along, they don't remember some of the things that people did until the history books are written. But when the history book of the United States Senate for the 20th century is written, I think it will say the definitive history that one of the most quiet, modest, but effective and wise U.S. senators that the Senate ever saw was Senator David Pryor. I've known a lot of politicians. I've never known anybody that was more in touch with the people than David is. And if David tells you that you need to give money to KUAF so we can build this building, you should pay attention. I do want to thank everybody that has worked on so tirelessly on this committee to raise the funds. I don't know, I didn't see them here, but Denise and Hershey Gardner have been so generous. And the honorary chairman doesn't have to do any work. He just has people like Ann Dawson beating the streets in Fort Smith, and the co-chairs, Frank Sharp, Ann Henry, and Danny Ferreter have really done all the work. And they've done magnificently well, and I think we have close to $1 million raised. What that means is the job isn't over. And what I think you all need to understand, and when I say you all, I mean the people down in Mena, I mean the people in Garfield, I mean the people in Harrison, that all of Northwest Arkansas is culturally better off because of KUAF. It is a lodestone in the things that bring us value to everyday life. We get unbiased, in-depth news. We get classical music. We get wonderful creative programs that would not survive on commercial television. And we do this only because so many of you here have been generous every year in your annual giving. But we got to do a little better. We have to build this building. They're being, in effect, kicked out of their university building, and I think it's being torn down or something. And they don't have a home, and we have to help the homeless. And I know we can do this, and I know we should do it, and I know all of Northwest Arkansas, this great big circle called Northwest Arkansas, is going to be better off if we do this, if we give till it hurts. And I've been there, done that, I'm going to do it again. I hope you join me. Thank you.
We need to get him on the radio. Spring fundraiser starts March 28th, Jim, 6 a.m. Thanks, Jim. Jim did mention a couple of names who have been very important to us throughout the last year and a half as we've organized and worked to raise money for the new facility. And I want to mention and thank members of the KUAF fundraising committee, who include Hershey and Denise Garner, who are standing in that. When you look across the street to look at the hole in the ground, you see Denise. They're standing guard. Eric Wales, who isn't here this evening. David Malone is here. Hope Bradbury is here. Hi, Hope. And let's see, Louise Shaper, if she's not in this room, she is in the building somewhere. There's Louise. Lynn Carver is here. Ann Dawson drove up from Fort Smith. Michael Holloman is here. Susan Hoy, Amber and Ben Pinter, and Susan Park Spencer. These are people who we've been meeting with and working with every month for the last year and a half or so to raise money for the new facility that this time next year you'll see as you come to the Blair Library, and you'll always be welcome to come to KUAF. Well, back to the story of the radio station. Thanks to Jim Blair and many other people, we had the money. This is mid to late 80s. 85 was when we officially affiliated with NPR. You hear us today say an NPR station for the last 24 years. And it was due to the state funding that Jim Blair was able to get for us that we were able to affiliate with NPR and buy equipment. And then we started working on a power increase so people outside of Fayetteville could get the radio station. We started working with the Federal Communications Commission and ran into some technical snags. Our application was held up, revised, resubmitted, held up again, and then the federal grant that we had to pay for equipment was in jeopardy. I went to Washington, D.C. and met with a couple of FCC staff people, and then I went to Capitol Hill to ask our congressional delegation for assistance in expediting our application at the FCC. Congressman Hammerschmidt, who most of you know and remember, he offered to write a letter to the commission, and he did that. I met with a staffer in Senator Bumper's office and was told they'd see what they could do. And finally, I met with Senator Pryor. I told him the situation. He turned to his communications staff person and said, "Who do we know at the FCC?" And the staffer said, "Oh, whatever his name was, Joe Jones." I do remember he was the head of the Mass Media Bureau, which means he was a big shot at the FCC. Well, Senator Pryor said, "Right, see if you can get Joe on the phone." A few seconds later, the staffer had Joe Jones, and Senator Pryor was on the phone telling Joe about our situation, and if there was anything Joe could do to help move our application along, he'd appreciate it. I came back to Fayetteville, and a couple of weeks later, we had our construction permit.